But I met a martyr, and that's how I knew that if you have the mental capacity to be a drug addict, that you have the mental capacity to be sober. It's only people that are truly, the only victims don't have the option to have an excuse, even if it's a justifiable excuse, you know? And she was a true victim. I just wanted to be perfect, and like, you know, and there was that standard too. I'm from a really good family, a family of educators. Both my parents are retired teachers. My dad's dead, but you know, my mom was a natural born teacher and my dad was a teacher. And so I was the teacher's daughter, and you know, I was the daughter, I got good grades, and I was prodigal daughter. That's what mom used to call me. You know, and it was just this pressure, and it was pressure that was there, and it was pressure that I put on myself. And I knew something, I knew I had like these problems. I went into preschool and I used to have this daydream. I didn't realize till pretty recently that this was probably really weird, but I had this like fantasy where I would just sit really still, and if I sat still enough, I could just like shrink up inside of myself to the point of like a peanut. And I used to pretend that I could just stay still when I was out in public and disappear, and like my shell would be here, but nobody would know I was really gone. And you know, to have thoughts like that all the time, while you know that like you're, you know, a good student and a good daughter and just, you know, a good girl, it was this weird thing where like I knew something wasn't right. But I got good grades and I got a college, a scholarship to like a really small college in Southern West Virginia. But the point is it was an academic scholarship, and you know, I got good grades all the way to college, and I didn't even smoke pot until I went to college. But I believe this like lie that wallflowers are told, and it's like a lie that's told by parents and society and Hollywood, like The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which I love that movie, but it's bullshit. You know, not everybody finds themselves in college, and not everybody has this like awakening in college, and not everybody that didn't fit in high school and didn't fit in middle school and feels like they didn't fit in even if they had friends. You know, not everybody just like gets it together in college, and that's what I was banking on. It's like I put all my eggs in this college basket, but it was the only basket that I had, because I just didn't feel capable or able or really, I guess, worthy of living life. And it just seemed like life was easier for everybody else. And people would give me compliments, and I knew like, that's not true. You know, like my 4th grade teacher, he was like, oh, I don't have to worry about Jamie. She's going to be fine. And I was thinking in my head, I was like, how can I be, I'm not fine. And it's like, I tried to be just like this perfect person. And I am a high-strung perfectionist and a neurotic perfectionist and a self-destructive perfectionist. And that I just like cracked and I broke and I snapped myself like under the weight of all that effort, you know? So anyway, I went to college, and I don't know, I knew something. I thought I was just gonna be like the typical like sheltered daughter that just like parties too hard but then finds a passion. And all of a sudden I'm a senior, I'm entering my senior year of college, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had switched majors like every semester, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And pot helped, you know, and it did help. And so I thought, you know, if I'm just gonna party, and I like made this conscious decision to quit school, you know, just to like dive headfirst into, you know, into drug use, because time was up. Like it was time to pick a major and pick a career and like pull myself up by the bootstraps and all that like hokey shit that is such an oversimplification. It's like, it's not even like, you know, there's no point in even saying it. So, yeah, you know, if pot worked, cocaine worked better, and it did. And if, you know, if cocaine works, and smoking crack will work better, and it did. And so there was like just I just wanted to try everything, and needle dope was like, you know, the creme de la creme of escapism. And so that's what I did. And, you know, it was like until 21, it's like I could never be good enough to be good. And then from 21 to 34, it's like I could never be, you know, bad enough to be happy. And I said that in my book, and it was like a real epiphany to realize that, because that's what I just wanted to be okay. And people would say like, oh, you're wasting your life, or I thought you were too pretty to do this, or too smart to be doing that, or from too good a family. And it's like, well, you know, then what am I supposed to do? You know, you tell me, like, what? Because I'm like clearly missing something. And in my mind, I was like, I fucking knew it. I knew it, that everybody was wrong about me, that I wasn't going to get it together and like be this successful person. Because I knew I was messed up. And I told Mom and growing up that I was like, I think I need to talk to somebody, you know, because I knew something wasn't right in my mind. And I just had this like drive and this pull to self-destruct, and like nobody knew about this like internal side of me, or secret side. And I told her I wanted to go to a therapist, but this was in, you know, the late 90s and the early 2000s. There's just, I don't know, we just don't talk about like that. And then when I finally went to a therapist, I was already like had these pending felony charges, and she sent me to a psychiatrist. And I told them, you know, that I had been like cutting myself for 7 years, because I started cutting myself in middle school at 13. And then at 14, I got my first boyfriend. And like, I guess you could say like the first 2 drugs of choice was really like cutting my body and dating, because I was like a serial monogamous for 20 years. And I wanted love to be the hill I died on, you know, because everybody like wants a hill to die on, and why not, you know, have it be with somebody. But, you know, now I know I was really just codependent, and a lot of people take advantage. You know, a lot of guys will want to take advantage of somebody that just has like this walking stamp on their head that's like, please use me, you know. I was so attached. Like I've been a diagnosed love addict, although that's a bullshit term. But so, you know, like when I first started cutting myself, that was in 8th grade, and I was in the shower, and this was in 1998. And so there wasn't like the term cutting, there wasn't like the internet like there is today. I didn't know that was something I was going to do, and I didn't know it was really something people did. And I was shaving my legs, and this thought came into my mind, and it was just like, you know, what would happen if you cut your leg, and just to watch it bleed. And it hit me like an epiphany. It really did. And when I have 2 like cuts here, when I cut myself, it was like all of my mind and like this jumble of nerves and emotions, and I just was too fucking self-conscious to live. I was like clinically self-conscious. And, you know, all this like anxiety and emotions and all this like inferno of just stuff. It was like laser focused on the cut and the burn and the act. And it was like this macabre meditation. And the way it hit me, like I was meant to do that. So I thought for a long time that that's why I was like destined to be a junkie, like a true natural born junkie, because it was the only thing that makes sense, because I wasn't from that broken home. You know, I wasn't molested or hurt or anything. It was just like, when your mind is the problem and you don't love yourself and you don't have a strong sense of self, when your mind's the problem, it's like you know that you're the problem because you are your thoughts. You know, you're not really, like Eckhart Tolle says, you know, our thoughts are the clouds, but we are the sky. And that's beautiful. But at the time, I didn't know that, you know, and so my mind's the problem. It's like, well, you can't escape yourself, you know, and try as I might, I just never could get far enough away from my head to be okay. So when I met this guy, I was a full-blown IV drug addict from age 21 till 25. And the only thing that stopped me was like pending felony charges and a felony probation violation. And after 14 months of being locked up in 2010, when I got out, I was sentenced to rehab, and I had this 4-year period of sobriety because I wanted to be okay. I wanted things to be different. And everybody in my family was just like, oh yeah, that was a phase. Glad, you know, that's over with. And, you know, I wanted to be okay. And so I went through the motions. I didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. And I still had these mental health problems, but I wanted to be okay. So I just like reverted back into what I was taught, which is go to school, get good grades, like pay your taxes, be a good citizen, and you'll be happy, you know? And that's true for some people, but that's the traditional, you know, path doesn't work for everybody. And it worked for everybody in my family. It worked, you know, everybody was able to live except for me. So when I was sober, you know, I just wanted, you know, a family and a life. And so I had my first daughter, and then that relationship ended because I was still codependent, although I didn't know it at the time. And he had a lot of problems too. We both did. But when I went back to school, I was like, oh my God, you know, I'm going back. I'm a new student, a non-traditional student, a single mother, first time. And I just wanted to, you know, pass my classes and be okay. And when I made like the president's list, I got 1B, and it was actually in substance abuse, which is hilarious, but I was shooting dope at the time and nobody knew it. I had relapsed. At the end of this 4-year period of sobriety, you know, I had a bachelor's degree, and, you know, it was time to like commit to a life, like a normal life. And I couldn't do it. And that's like such a misconception too about addicts, is it's like, oh, when you want it bad enough. And it's like, no, that's not true. You know, people want to be okay. And even when people are like, oh, I like being homeless because it's, you know, we're an adaptable species. We're like highly adaptable, but you know, you want to be okay. You don't want to have to like stick a needle in your arm just so you can like manage your emotions or feel like you can exist in reality in a world where there's like no place for you, you know, as long as you're high, like that very real fact, you know, kind of dissipates for a moment. So when I relapsed, there was a period where I was trying to juggle, and like sometimes I would, you know, just do heroin when I relapsed. But like I said, at this point, you know, I have got my college degree. I have a job now. It was the one shot, and I knew it. It was my one shot at having a normal job. And it was, because I'm a drug felon in West Virginia and Virginia, it had to be a job using my bachelor's degree that was away from the two Virginias. And, you know, there was only one state, which was Maryland, where it was like kind of, that felt like an option, you know? And so I was like 4 hours away from my family. I was in this new area. And when I relapsed, I would try to like juggle, and I was like, I would try to be a functional addict. And although there's no such thing, there's like really no such thing with me being a functional addict. And I was getting a prescription for Suboxone, and I was abusing my Suboxone, and I shot up Suboxone, and through like dirty IV practices, I gave myself MRSA. And I gave myself cellulitis too, which is why this hand is like permanently puffy and purple, because my whole arm swelled up and I couldn't put my arm down. I had to hold it up, and my fingers were so swollen, like they started to crack. And then I lift up my bust, and I lifted up my sleeve, and it was, I could see my veins, and it was honestly terrifying. Because it looked like a black Sharpie. Somebody had drawn like a bear tree on my arm, and it was the infection in my blood. And I drove to the hospital, and they ran a test, and they were like, holy shit, you gave yourself MRSA. This is pretty bad. We're gonna have to put you on serious antibiotics now, but you'll be okay as long as you don't become septic. Then it's a coin toss. That's what they said. They said, then it's 50-50. And I became septic. And they had to airlift me, life flight me from one hospital to the other, that was the first time I was life flighted. And the last thing I remember before I woke up in the bigger hospital was it was a man and woman that was doing the helicopter that were taking me. And she said, the only thing I remember, she said, oh, it's Friday the 13th and it's a full moon. Mom didn't want me to fly tonight. And I remember thinking oh God, that doesn't sound good for me. And so, yeah, I woke up 4 days later in the ICU in a different hospital, and I was on a ventilator. I had over 100 pounds of water weight. My liver, my kidneys, my organs were shutting down. My body was literally dying, and they were having to check to see if I had infection that had gotten affected my heart valves, because the next step was open heart surgery. And they said, okay, it's 50-50. If we have to do open heart surgery, that's 50-50 too. And I was like, oh my God. And, but luckily I didn't have have open heart surgery. And after a month of these liquid antibiotics for hours every day, I started to turn around. But, at that point, it's my God, I was this perfect daughter, perfect student, the perfect everything to everyone. And, then I was a drug addict, and then I had, which I thought was the only option, because option A, doing the right thing didn't lead to any fulfillment or happiness or peace of mind, or I couldn't live with myself. And so I went the total opposite direction and became a drug addict. But now I had this 4-year period of sobriety and, have a college degree and all this stuff. And my family knows that I've relapsed in the most epic way. They had to call in the family, say your goodbyes to your fucking piece of shit, fuck up daughter. My sister's a nurse, and she was like, oh, okay, I see what you've done here. She immediately knew that it was something I had accidentally done to myself. And so I'm sitting in the hospital, and I'm like, God, how am I supposed to be sober now? Everybody knows I've relapsed. Everybody knows I'm a screw up and that things, aren't going to go well for me after all. Why would I be sober? And it's not even why, but it was how, how to live. Obviously, I can't do this. So that's when I kind of started to honestly think I was cursed or something, or that was a distinct possibility. Because, like I said, I'm just a natural born junkie. That was my mindset. I was I guess my lot in life is to be a cautionary tale for my immediate family members, and somebody has to be the cautionary tale, and that was me. And it made sense because it didn't make sense that I was an addict. It didn't make sense because of my background, and I was really good at being phony and pretending to be okay, and all this stuff. And I can't be okay. So that's why it made so much sense. It's weird to have mental illness, because I guess this is how it is for everybody, kind of regardless. But really the biggest, it's not even the bipolar. It's the borderline personality disorder, because it's like your personality is literally disordered. It's just like your personality does not play well with others. It's just strange, because it's like you feel like you have, or I feel like I have sometimes no control, over myself. And I have, all these emotions, and I can see the good in people, but what did it matter? I couldn't be okay existing in life. And it kind of led to this feeling like that self-destruction. It felt like fulfillment, because it was exciting and it was something to do. And it was like, okay, I'm in this drug scene. It was the only scene that I ever actually felt a little comfortable in, because everybody that was there. And it was weird. I didn't like to talk about my family, like when I was locked up or when I was homeless, because everybody around me had this horrible story, like this tragic story. And, I felt shitty, because I didn't have that, I didn't have that awful background or generational poverty. I'm from a 2-parent household, and my parents did not even fight. I have one memory in over 50 years when Dad died of them having a true disagreement. They had one argument in 50 years is what I'm saying. It's amazing. And so it wasn't my background, it was my mind. And that was kind of shameful to say around people, and the thing about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps is you do have to do that, in the sense that you have to take charge of your life and direction, and get a focus on something that's not going to kill you, because you accept yourself and value yourself enough to do that. But it's like a dichotomy, because people that have, it's like when you start out with so much in such a pile of festering shit, it's really hard to get out of that. And there was this one of the youngest people I was locked up with in the women's pod when I was on my way to prison for the one time. She was one of the youngest people. She was 18 or 19, and her mom got her into prostitution, and and everybody knew that. Everybody knew what a piece of shit her mom was. And I was like, God, she's she had this immaturity. And I was like, what kind of chance did she have? If you're born into that, what kind of chance do you have? And then when I met that woman who had the mind of a child, she was homeless on the streets with me, because let me back up and say, when they released me from the hospital, they were like, okay, you got this? And I was like, no, but, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay at the hospital and just be there. I mean, I liked it, because I knew it's God, everybody knows. And besides that, I can't live life, whether it's getting out of bed without wanting to cut yourself so you can streamline your thoughts for 1 second. Or, whatever. It's in Drugstore Cowboy, Matt Dillon says something I think it's Drugstore Cowboy. He's like, oh, us poor junkies, we have to do things like put on our shoes, and it's true. Sometimes life is just more difficult, but yeah, I felt like a piece of shit, because it didn't make sense that it was so difficult for me. And when I was released from the hospital, I was already a full-blown IV drug addict, just from the people that were, coming to visit me. That obviously wasn't my family. And I was like, man, who can you tell? Hey, actually, this wasn't a rock bottom. I had not learned my lesson. There's no lesson to learn. I'm not functional, and I'm a heroin addict when I couldn't even leave the hospital. It's so crazy, but it's how was I going to get sober then? It was the worst time to get sober. That's what I was thinking. So that's how I became homeless after a few months after that, because Kat was out of the bag, and it was just going to be a thing where we were going to stay, me and my ex, we were going to stay on the, around where the pills were for just like a week or two or figure some things out. But I felt like there wasn't anything to figure out, that I had tried to do the right thing. I gave it another shot. And 4 years later, it's like, okay, this is my lot in life. And that's when I met this woman who had the mind of a child. And, you know, a small town homelessness, there wasn't that many of us. It was only like 10 of us. And she was the only one who didn't have an addiction. And it's like, my God, you're this grown-ass woman and you're so cute. You just can be a cute little figure, cute face. And you just had this child's mind, and she had some parents somewhere. Like, how did she end up on the streets? It was like fucking disgusting. She was this martyr, and I met her, and this old hoe was trying to pimp her out, and she was like, "Here, hold her for me." And she hands me this girl, and by the arm, and she wanted me to hold her while she went in the gas station to get like a soda and cigarettes. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And she was like, "This is gonna be good. I think, yeah, let's do this and make some money." And I was like, "Man, come on, you know." And I got her to my car, and I was like homeless, and I was just really depressed, and I just felt hopeless. You know, I was in a bad relationship. I was, you know, I couldn't live life as an adult. I had tried it, and so this was it. And now there's like this woman who's like a fucking child, and these dirty old men would just like, they would all like be wanting to be with her because it was like a pederast dream, because she was like technically legal. But I mean, I don't know if she even would be legal because she couldn't consent to anything. And it's like, where were her parents? You know, what type of chance did she have? You know, she had no chance. And that's how I learned, like, you know, your mind is a factor and your background's a factor, but at the same time, if you have the mental capacity to be an addict, then you have the mental capacity to not be an addict. And because she didn't even have the option to like have an excuse. And it was just like sickening. And I think about her a lot. And it's like, I tried to get her, you know, I asked about like calling a number, like an adult protective services number, you know, get some help. And she just wanted to, she would smoke pot and cigarettes, and that would kind of like help her mind. And she just would cry, like she didn't want to go back. She didn't want to be locked up like an animal. But I don't know, maybe I should have like called, but she didn't want me to. And I don't know. And, you know, and they're just going to fail her, because that's like all the system does anyway. It like fails people who have like first, you know, failed themselves. But she didn't have an option or have that opportunity. And I did. And so that's why I was like, you know, uncomfortable talking about my family, because, you know, a lot of people didn't have it as good as I did. And when I went to mental health professionals and addiction professionals and all that stuff, they are a business as well. And they really wanted to focus on the bipolar, because you can, you know, take a pill for bipolar. And they tried Lexapro and lithium and something else. And finally, after like a few months, I went back to the psychiatrist, and I was like, "Look, I cannot feel my feelings. I actually don't feel much of anything. You know, I don't think this is normal." And she was like, "Oh, that's what normal feels like." And she said, this is like exactly what she did. She said, "I think you may be borderline." But when she said that, I didn't think borderline personality disorder. I knew I was codependent. I knew I had anxiety. I knew I had this addiction to treat my mind, but I just didn't feel like bipolar was, you know, it for me. And I think she just wanted to give me a pill, because like, that's the thing with borderline. It's not a chemical imbalance. It's like a personality imbalance. You just have to like learn to live with yourself. And psychiatrists don't have time for that. So I don't know. I just never went back to her, and I don't take any like pills as a result of that. It just didn't work out for me. But I was homeless for that year. And when the guy that I was with, who is my ex-husband, when he got arrested, you know, you're going to, you're not going to have like a stable relationship if you are homeless with your partner and you're like doing sex work to support two habits. Like a relationship can't sustain that. And, but nevertheless, you know, he was a person with me who was like going through this thing with me, and I'm a codependent and I'm a love addict and we have this history. And so it was like really hard for me to not attach to people and not attach like really tightly. And when he went to jail, like my habit doubled. Like in that hour, my habit doubled, and I had never, you know, the third time I was strung out after I got sick from MRSA, that was the first time I had like a heroin connection, and that was the difference, you know. Addiction only goes one way, it progresses and progresses. And so my addiction had progressed by the time I, you know, got strung out for the third time and became homeless, and I had this heroin connection. And, you know, I just knew like, God, I'm gonna die in this like fucking town that I cannot stand, and nobody's even gonna know I'm dead, or, you know, like worse, I'm gonna die like surrounded by people who lack the capacity to care if I die or not. And so I messaged Mom and I asked if she would take me to Detox, and it had been about 14 months of, you know, that I was, you know, on the streets, and I asked her to take me to Detox because I wanted to not die in Southern West Virginia, you know, and I knew I had to get sober to do that. I went to Detox, and then I went to Rehab for the second time, and it was the first time on my own accord. And even the fancy rehabs, like they don't, you know, they just want to medicate you. I came out of rehab, and I'm not even kidding, like on more drugs than like I've ever been on. It was just like, you know, prescription drugs, but my mind was the problem, and it didn't help me like value myself or feel okay. Like nothing helped. You know, that's how I met the guy that tried to kill me. And really, you know, he only did to me, it was a murder-suicide, and he died and I survived. He cut both of our throats, and I lost half the blood in my body. And, you know, that was the start of me learning how to live with myself. When he cut my throat, like, I really didn't think he would do it because we were doing a lot of meth at the time. And so I thought he was just like acting weird by like doing this weird stuff and like holding a knife to his neck. Like even when somebody's having a psychotic break, it's like you think they're not gonna kill themselves. Like nobody's gonna slit their throat right in front of you, let alone like yours too. And that's exactly what happened. And I said to myself, I was like, I'm not fucking dying today. I'm not dying in a trailer in the middle of bumfuck nowhere with this guy that is trying to kill us. And when I woke up in the hospital the second time, I was life flighted. It's like I came to and I realized, like, when I woke up, I didn't open my eyes, and I could hear my mom. She was talking to a nurse behind me, and she said, does she know he's dead? Like, and that's how I found out Joe had died and I had lived. And I realized I was in the hospital for a month. He cut my throat. He almost cut my hand off because it went down like that, and it cut to here. And I have a lot of like defensive wounds. But I was in the hospital for a month then too, and it's like I was realizing that in fight or flight mode, I went into like fight or flight when he was trying to kill us. And it took that happening and you know, meeting Joe and him trying to kill us and going into fight or flight, it took all that for me to get out of my head in a way that wasn't through like, you know, chemical escapism. It was like the craziest sense of presence. It's like I was in the moment, like literally for the first time in my life at age 34, like as I was like trying not to get killed. and like actively fighting this guy. He had 2 knives and I had none. And I'm looking back and I'm like, you know, I was just going on this instinct to live. It's like the only thing I was reacting on was this instinct to live. And it's like a haunting epiphany to be in the hospital and having been so close to death so many times. That's not even counting like overdoses, like serious overdoses where like you wake up in the back of an ambulance and, you know, Narcan and all that stuff. Divine intervention. That was my first overdose on fentanyl in 2008. It was literally Pulp Fiction style divine intervention that I lived. And all this stuff had happened, but it took him trying to kill us. And it took this like horrific thing for me to realize that I was like maybe worthy of life. And just because I didn't feel able doesn't mean that that feeling is valid. It doesn't mean I'm actually unable to live or to love myself. And so that's what started like my road to recovery, which is corny to say, but it's true. Like the scariest thing for me, the actual thing that gave me PTSD, it wasn't like the blood, it was like this moment before he had the knife to my throat. He was behind me. We were like sitting down. It was like a bear hug standoff, and he had his legs wrapped around me and this knife to my throat, and he had done like that to put the knife to his throat, like this big ass hunting knife was pointing to his throat. And it was the most fear. I hadn't really felt genuine terror until the split second right before he cut my throat, because I really didn't think he was going to do it. And then it just dawned on me and it hit me like this fucking wave, because there was like 2 minutes where we were like at this standoff, and I thought like, this is weird, but he's not going to try to kill us. And I realized he was right before he did. And it was like this, everything in my life led to that moment. You know, like I had 20 years of dating from 14 to 34 of dating, like, you know, men that couldn't really love me because I didn't love myself. And I had this lifetime of mental illness and 13 years of addiction. It just like culminated in this epiphany, like, man, he's going to try to kill me. You know, this is it. There's nothing I can do about it. Nobody knows where I'm at. Nobody knows what's happening. You know, nobody knows anything. And, you know, it was the most scared I ever was. And as soon as he slit my throat, I actually like went into fight or flight mode. And so yeah.
And you're doing okay now?
Yeah, that was in July 19th of 2018 was when he tried to kill us, and he killed himself. And I do hope he can find the peace in death that he couldn't find in life. But I couldn't hate him or resent him for only trying to do to me what I had like tried to do to myself for so long, you know, because he was like a victim of himself that day, and I was like nearly a victim of myself. But yeah, that's what started it.
Did it take something that extreme for you to finally wake up to your self-destructive?
Oh yeah,
tendencies?
I mean, and it was as extreme as it had to be, you know, because overdoses wouldn't work, and homelessness and felonies, like nothing would work, because I didn't think I was worthy of living. So it was like, whatever happens, you know, happens. I was like ready to die. I was sure, I like could feel it in my bones that I was ready to die, because, you know, it's like, I'm gonna get high till the motherfucking day I die. It was like this mantra, because I didn't know what else to do, you know, so it didn't matter that it was synthetic or fleeting, whether it was a guy or, you know, heroin or whatever, it didn't matter. It was just like something in the moment that made me feel okay. And if he hadn't done that, I don't think I'd be alive today, you know, because I wouldn't have gone into fight or flight mode, and I wouldn't have realized that I'm not, you know, these thoughts and feelings, you know, they're like, I'm worthy of life because I'm alive. So I just have to find out like why that is, you know.
What do you think it is about being are you more borderline or bipolar or both?
Both, yeah.
Both. What do you think it is about that just keeps you from wanting to realize your potential and just live a great life and accept great things in your life.
It's like, if your personality and your mind, works differently, it's easy to think that you're just broken, because the way that's going to work isn't going to necessarily be the same direction. And so I just felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. I hated being a human. I hated being in my body. I hated being in reality. I was one of those 4-year-olds that cried when I had to poop. I cried when I had to throw up. Like, I was just like fearful of life because I couldn't, accept that I just have to like go my own way. It's like you just want to draw in all these emotions, like as long as they're like, anger, sad, like as long as it was just like, going to allow me to feel something, that was enough, because it's easy to like conflate passion with love and danger for excitement. If you can't exist just as is, and I think that's part of the reason why, Oh God, I'm a fucking nervous wreck, Mark. I really am.
You're doing fine though.
Okay.
Your life is, tell me about your life today.
Well, I have had to start. So when I was in the hospital, I was like, okay, I have got to try. I don't know how I'm going to live. I have like cotton mouth. I'm so nervous. But I don't know how to live. I don't know what I'm doing. I have failed epically. I'm in my mid fucking 30s and I'm still like, it's so sad. I was almost killed by a guy, but it was the same bullshit as when I was 14. It was literally 20 years of just like talking on the phone to a guy who just said all the right things. And me, I could just feel myself like giving up any little shred of myself that I had to this relationship, because it felt like a path and a way. So I had all these like a string of failures for a lifetime. And so I had to really just look at, like, accept myself like as is and work on that, And as someone who hated themselves and hated life, and I didn't fit in with my family, with the Catholic Church, with this small town, I just felt like I never fit. I didn't fit with college. Like I said, the drug scene was the only place I felt like people got it. Because even if you weren't from a broken home, or you were from a broken home, it was like this unspoken camaraderie of like, okay, you get it. It's like you cannot fucking exist and function without, some type of enhancements. And it's all like to feel more or feel less, or just like to feel, period, So I had to look at myself as like, kind of like this trinity. I broke myself up into mind, body, and spirit, which I think we all are kind of gods and goddesses in that way. Like, we're all a holy trinity. And I started to really be selfish in the right ways. And people say drug addicts are selfish, and that's bullshit. Because addiction, it's like this parasite on your heart and a parasite in your soul, and it like latches on. And you don't do anything for yourself if you're a drug addict. You do it for your, for this addiction that has taken you over. So it's actually like you're very, you're not selfish at all in that way. And I began to really like act selfishly in the right way. And I really worked on like radical self-acceptance and self-love and compassion. When I was homeless, we squatted in this house, this abandoned house, and it was a hoarder house, a former hoarder house. It was horrific. And I stayed in this little girl's room, and she had painted an Alice in Wonderland mural. And in the midst of this fucking old ass empty, it was abandoned, but it wasn't empty, hoarder house, there was this beautiful bedroom with an Alice in Wonderland like mural scene. And that's where I was sleeping. And Scotch taped to the wall, it said, it was a fortune cookie that she had taped. It said, "Your heart is your greatest asset." And I kept that fortune cookie until the cops or the hazmat team or whoever had to throw it away because it was like drenched in blood from the murder-suicide. But I had that fortune cookie the whole, that whole time, like 14 months. And I just had to learn that it's not that my heart was too big or that I was too emotional or too caring or too anything. I just had to learn to live with myself and accept that. So I started journaling, and in 2 months I cured my PTSD. And so now I have a focus of trying to actually get my writing out into the world and, you know, it's weird because I think it's pretty good. And just in summary, the last thing, I got a dog. Dogs are like the key to life. I thought I was a cat person, so I say that with a heavy heart, but it's true. Dogs are better. You know, it's just like in summary, I would have just like it's weird to realize that you deserve life, you know, and you deserve to live and you deserve to be happy and you have something to contribute. Because I didn't start writing and I didn't really feel like, okay, this is something I'm good at. I was not good at anything for so long. And that's how I felt. And it's just like eerie to think about being so close to death for so long. And, you know, how many people are gonna die, you know, without even knowing that they like have something to offer and that they deserve happiness. You know, it's really depressing to think about, but there's
All right, Jamie, thank you so much for
all right,
sharing
thank
your story.
you.